For 20 relentless years, the walls of Abeokuta stood firm against one of Africa's fiercest powers. From 1840 to 1864, the Egba people defied the mighty kingdom of Dahomey and its infamous Amazon warriors, not once, not twice, but across decades of brutal clashes. This is the story of Egba's stand against the powerful kingdom of Dahomey. Born from the ashes of broken towns and the flight of refugees who refused to kneel. Strengthened by memory, united by faith, it rose as a fortress of stone in the heart of Yorubaland. And against it marched Dahomey, an empire of fear and fire, whose kings wore skulls as trophies and sent warriors, men and women alike, to spill blood in the name of power. From King Ghezo to King Glele, Dahomey came east with muskets, war chants, and the dreaded Amazon regiments. But instead of conquest, they found resistance, unyielding, defiant, unforgettable. Yet before Abeokuta earned its name as the rock that could not be broken, we must go back to the 1830s, when Egba refugees first gathered beneath Olumo Rock, and the seeds of defiance were sown. The early 19th century in West Africa was a crisis. The Oyo Empire, once considered the stronghold of Yorubaland, had begun to crumble. Civil wars, fueled by internal rivalries and external pressures, like the Fulani jihadists seeking to expand their reach south, tore it apart. By the 1830s, Oyo's authority lay in ruins. Amid this turmoil, the Egba people, the Yoruba subgroup, were displaced. Their ancestral towns, Ijaye, Ibara, and Itoko, were not merely attacked. They were consumed by fire and chaos, drowned in the roar of war drums and the screams of the fallen refugees fleeing south, searching for safety. Their flight ended not in ruin, but at the foot of a mighty granite outcrop towering stone-wrapped in hills and forests, a fortress carved by nature itself. Here, beneath the rock, they found sanctuary. They named it Abeokuta under the rock. Between 1830 and 1835, waves of Egba refugees, Ake, Okeona, Bagura, and Owu, moved toward the rock. Broken by war, yet bound by survival, clan after clan laid their roots in its shadow, turning exile into the foundation of a new destiny. Out of necessity, they forged an alliance, fragile yet fierce. Each clan kept its chiefs, its pride, its ways. But when the drums of war sounded, they stood as one. Thus was born the Egba Confederacy, a brotherhood of survival bound beneath the rock. Mud and stone walls rose high, encircling the city like clenched fists. Militias drilled with spears and muskets. Hunters shed their silence to become warriors, and from the summit of Olumo Rock, sentinels watched the horizon. By the 1840s, Abeokuta was no longer just a refuge. It had become a fortress, a city of exiles forged into steel, and so they trained armies for any threat that would come. That threat was coming soon. To the west, a storm was gathering. The kingdom of Dahomey, once bowed under Oyo's shadow, now rose with fire in its veins. In 1818, King Ghezo seized the throne, and with Oyo collapsing into ruin, Dahomey broke its chains of tribute and declared itself master of its own destiny. But Dahomey's wealth is built on blood. Its armies sweep across the land, raiding neighbors and dragging thousands into chains, slaves for sacrifice at the fearsome annual customs, and for sale to European ships waiting on the coast. At the heart of this machine stands the Agoji, the women warriors the Europeans would call Amazons. Recruited from captives or chosen from within, they renounce family and vow celibacy, forged into weapons of the king. Spears in hand, machetes at their sides, they march without fear, an army of women trained to kill without hesitation. Dahomey's economy begins to falter as the British push anti-slavery treaties, choking the slave trade. Ghezo, under pressure, looks east. Abeokuta, sitting on fertile lands once key to slave routes, stands in his way. The Egba are not just resisting, they're blocking Dahomey's captives from reaching the coast. To Ghezo, they're an enemy that must be crushed. By 1843, he ordered large-scale expeditions to break the Egba and reopen the routes by force. But what lies ahead? Can a city of refugees withstand an empire built on blood? The tension between the Egba Confederacy and Dahomey escalates beyond diplomacy. For Ghezo, the stakes are clear. Unless the slave routes through Egba territory reopen, his kingdom's economy will collapse. For the Egba people, allowing Dahomey's armies to pass means death, captivity, and the loss of their hard-won home. Peace is impossible. War is inevitable. In 1844, the silence of the frontier was shattered at Akeodon. There, on the edge of Egba lands, Dahomey's legions advanced regiments drilled to perfection, marching with ruthless intent. Their mission was clear: to overpower, to plunder, to drag captives back in chains. To them, the Egba were nothing more than scattered refugees, an easy conquest waiting to be crushed beneath their boots. But the Egba were waiting. Under the command of the fierce war chief Oshodi, they turned the forest into a weapon. Narrow trails became killing grounds, where ambushes waited like coiled snakes. Dahomey's regiments, confident in their rigid formations, marched straight into the trap. Then the silence broke, muskets cracked, war cries thundered, and blades flashed from the shadows. The Egba struck with a blend of coastal firearms and ancestral steel, fighting not as scattered exiles but as hunters defending their home. The clash was brutal, sudden, and decisive. Dahomey's advance collapsed under the assault, their losses staggering. For Ghezo's warriors, especially the elite who prided themselves on invincibility, it was more than defeat. It was humiliating. The exiles they had scorned had drawn blood. The sting of Akeodon did not break Ghezo, it sharpened him. Retreat was only a pause, a breath before the storm. In the years that followed, Dahomey's fury spread like fire through the borderlands. Egba villages were raided, homes reduced to ash, captives dragged in chains. Every strike was meant to bleed the Confederacy, to remind them that Dahomey's wrath would not fade. By 1849, Ghezo was ready to make his move. This time, he would not send others. He would lead. His target, Imoshe, a crucial frontier town standing like a gate between Dahomey and Abeokuta. The king marched at the head of hundreds, his army swelled with hardened regiments, and the dreaded Agoji, Dahomey's women warriors, revered and feared as shock troops. As they advanced, their war chants rolled across the plains, drums beating like thunder, muskets gleaming in the sun. It was not a raid, it was a declaration. Dahomey was coming for the Egbas. The Egba were no longer the scattered exiles Ghezo once scorned. Battle had tempered them, and under Oshodi's command, they had become something fiercer, disciplined militias forged over time. At Imoshe, earthworks rose higher, trenches ran deeper, and walls bristled with defenders. British traders and missionaries had opened new channels with the Egbas, and with them came more firearms, more powder, more resolve. When Dahomey descended, their muskets cracked like thunder across the field. Smoke rolled through the town as volleys tore into the defenses, but the Egba did not break. They fought where Dahomey was weakest, pressing close, striking from cover, dragging the fight into narrow spaces where numbers and formations meant nothing. Steel clashed, muskets roared at point-blank range, and in the chaos, the Egba held their ground. Imoshe did not fall. After hours of fighting, the Egba broke Dahomey's advance, capturing weapons and forcing another retreat. The twin defeats at Akeodon and Imoshe proved the Egba people were no minor threat, they're a force to be reckoned with. But can they withstand the full might of Dahomey's war machine? By 1850, the conflict had outgrown its roots. It was no longer fought for territory or spoils of trade. It had become a war of pride, of vengeance, of wounded kingship. Ghezo, beaten back time and again, burned for a reckoning. And then, at last, he found a crack in Abeokuta's armor. The crack was Owu, one of the founding clans of the Egba Confederacy, yet scarred by old rivalries, bitter from disputes over leadership. Their loyalty had begun to waver. Ghezo's envoys came bearing promises, gold, titles, and power. They whispered to Owu's chiefs that their future need not be bound to Abeokuta. The seed of betrayal took root. A bargain was struck in silence and secrecy. When Dahomey marched again, Owu would not stand with the Confederacy. It would stand against it. The betrayal shocked the Egba. Their alliance, built on shared trauma, is pierced from within. Led by Oshodi and Shodeki, son of Sodeki, the commander-in-chief of the Egba army, they responded with ruthless precision. They marched on Owu, storming the town in a swift, bloody battle. Resistance is minimal. Owu's defenders, expecting Dahomey's aid, are unprepared. The Olowu of Owu is captured, publicly humiliated, and executed as a warning to those who might want to side with the enemies. Owu's autonomy is dismantled, its leaders crushed. The Egba prove they'll destroy their own rather than be divided. Ghezo's plan backfires. His allies are gone before he can act. In Abomey's palace, surrounded by Vodun priests, generals, and Agoji warriors, Ghezo makes a public blood oath: Abeokuta will fall. Thousands of warriors are summoned. New sacrifices are made to summon ancestral spirits, and the kingdom prepares for a final massive assault. It would not be a raid or border clash. It would be a full-scale invasion. Inside Abeokuta, the Egba hears of Ghezo's vow through scouts and messengers. They tighten defenses, stockpile weapons, and train relentlessly. War chiefs like Balogun Sokenu, Ogunbona, and Apati drilled militias in turns. Women and children are taught emergency drills. British missionaries, while neutral, provide arms through coastal merchants. The stage is set for the ultimate test. Will Abeokuta's unity hold against Dahomey's fury? July 1851. Dahomey launches its largest expedition in decades. It was led by Ghezo himself, and marching beside him were thousands of warriors, including the feared Ahosi. Historians estimated that over 6,000 troops, including at least 2,000 Ahosi, took part in the campaign. Their mission: burn the city to the ground and reclaim the slave routes. They attacked Ishaga, a border town, forcing its chief to guide them to a supposedly vulnerable wall. Inside Abeokuta, the Egba mobilize. Sodeki's successors rally every warrior. Cannons are mounted, trenches dug, and civilians move to safety. On the morning of July 3rd, Dahomey's army launched its attack. Wave after wave of warriors storm Abeokuta's gates. The Ahosi lead, their war paint gleaming, muskets firing, blades flashing. Their cries shake the hills as they charge the outer defenses. The Egba, outnumbered, fought back with ambushes, hidden trenches, and gunfire. Women pour hot oil from rooftops. Warriors use Olumo Rock's terrain to choke off advances. The fighting rages for 2 days, relentless and brutal. The Agoji fought like demons, piling bodies into moats to climb walls, their discipline unbreakable. But the Egba holds their ground. On the third day, a captured Agoji reveals a shocking truth. Many of Dahomey's fiercest fighters are women. Instead of fear, this ignites the Egba's rage. What happens when a city of exiles faces an army of fearless women? Led by warriors Balogun Sokenu, Ogunbona, and Sariki Apati, the Egba launched a full-scale counterattack. From behind their walls, they surge forward, catching Dahomey in close-quarter combat. At this point, British cannons, loaded with grape shot, fire into the heart of the enemy ranks. The battlefield erupts in chaos. Smoke, screams, and blood fill the air. Dozens of Agoji fall. Muskets clash with machetes. Dahomey's lines break. By sunset, Ghezo flees, barely escaping, returning to Dahomey in humiliation. Out of the 2,000 Agoji warriors who entered Abeokuta, fewer than 1,200 survived. The rest were either killed or captured. It was the first time the Ahosis had been defeated in open war. The Battle of Abeokuta is a turning point in West Africa's history. The Egba Confederacy rises as a regional power, its defiance crippling Dahomey's slave trade. The British, seeing Abeokuta's strength, tightened anti-slavery efforts along the coast. Ghezo returns to Dahomey humiliated, his prestige shattered. The Agoji, once invincible, are broken. Abeokuta earns its name, the Unbreakable City. But Ghezo's defeat doesn't end his ambition. Can the Egba withstand another assault from a king bent on revenge? Ghezo, though still in power, never recovered his reverence. He died in 1858, disgraced. For 13 years, both sides prepared. He died in 1858, disgraced. His son, King Glele, inherits his fury and his unfinished war. Where his father failed to crush Abeokuta, he swore he would succeed. In Abeokuta, the Egba grows stronger. They rebuild fortifications with stone and clay, train year-round militias, and expand their arsenal through British traders. Alliances with Ijebu and Oyo bolster their ranks. New leaders, mentored by Oshodi, Ogunbona, and Sokenu, rise to meet the threat. By 1864, Glele was ready. He studies his father's failures, frontal charges, poor terrain use, and plans a multi-pronged assault to encircle Abeokuta. His army, between 8,000 to 10,000 soldiers strong and a revitalized Agoji corps, some of which were daughters of those killed in the 1851 massacre, marches east. The Egba, now a seasoned force, turn border villages into kill zones, clearing civilians and setting traps. As Dahomey approaches, scouts lure them into a forested ridge. What happens when a vengeful king meets a city that's learned every trick of war? The second invasion begins with chaos. Egba marksmen open fire from hidden positions. Flaming arrows rain down. Booby-trapped trenches halt Dahomey's advance. Glele's multi-pronged strategy collapses as his forces, divided by rocky terrain, could not regroup. At Abeokuta's gates, the Egba, refreshed by new fighters from Ijebu and Oyo, unleashed hell. Cannons fired grape shot, muskets blazed, and burning oil repels climbers. Decoy gates and rolling boulders sow panic. The Ahosi, charged with courage, were met with improvised explosives, gunpowder-packed gourds. By the second day, Dahomey's morale crumbles. On the third day, Glele retreats. The losses are staggering, perhaps 4,000 Dahomeans dead, including many Ahosis. The Egba, reinforced by allies, lost fewer. Abeokuta stands untouched, its defenders triumphant. Glele's dreams die on Olumo Rock's slopes. The Second Battle of Abeokuta ended Dahomey's military ambitions. Never again will it launch a major war into Yorubaland. The Egba-Dahomey Wars reshape West Africa. Abeokuta thrives as a center of Yoruba identity, commerce, and anti-slavery advocacy. Its victories draw scholars and African elites from Sierra Leone and Brazil. It remained independent until British colonization in the early 20th century, but never as a conquered people. Dahomey, weakened by defeats, faces internal dissent and economic collapse. By 1894, France conquered it, dissolving the Ahosis and burning Dahomey's palaces. The empire that threatened Abeokuta is no more. Abeokuta's story is one of defiance. Twice tested, twice victorious, the Egba turned exile into strength. Olumo Rock, still standing in modern Nigeria, is a monument to their will. The Ahosi's bravery, celebrated in Benin today, endures despite their losses. In an age of empires and chains, the Egba chose to fight. They were the hunted who became hunters, the forgotten who became legends. If this story stirs you, don't scroll away. Like to honor the warriors who held the line. Comment: had you heard of this war before? Watch more tales of pre-colonial wars, of defiance and strategy, and step deeper into Africa's forgotten battlefields. For these stories, fierce, blood-stained, and buried for too long, demand to be remembered.